Just a quick update before today's episode. As you may have noticed, it's been quiet over here for a while. That's because I've been on maternity leave and now have a beautiful daughter at home. It's also because I've focused on hosting some live events the past year and a half, and I'm very happy to be able to share recordings of 3 of those conversations. I'm just in the process of figuring out what combining podcasting and family life may look like. If you want to support this work, you're so welcome to support the podcast on Patreon. So visit patreon.com/forestofthought for more information. Okay, let's jump into today's episode. Welcome to the Forest of Thought with me, Ingrid Rieser. Many cultures maintain that we're not born human, but that we may become fully human through cultivation and care. Could it be that our destructive tendencies are not because of our humanness, but rather due to a lack of it? If so, where and how can we cultivate our humanity? All species play their part in the living web. What role might we humans have to play in this unfolding drama? These were the questions we brought with us to this public conversation with cultural anthropologist MIKAEL KURKIALA.
Something of the world becomes realized only through us. It is through our self-reflection, through our experience of the world's beauty and meaning. Perhaps our role is to be the ears and eyes of God.
MIKAEL is a cultural anthropologist and author. He spent many years living and working with the Oglala Lakota people of South Dakota and is currently a researcher at the Swedish Church Office. He has written extensively on existential questions, such as the search for meaning in modern times. We recorded this conversation in December of 2024 with a lovely audience at the Uppsala Public Library in Sweden. I'm very happy to be here with MIKAEL today. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
My name is MIKAEL Kurkiala, and I'm an anthropologist. I came from Finland to Sweden in the 1980s to study cultural anthropology, and specifically to study Native Americans and specifically the Lakota people on the Great Plains of South Dakota. So I started my studies there, and I did my fieldwork on the reservation in the 1990s, and became very close to a very traditional Lakota family, and I became part of that family. But I never wrote about them in my thesis, so the thesis was a separate thing. And I've also had a lifelong interest for existential and religious issues, and have been sort of gravitating to and fro different religious settings, specifically a traditional Lakota religion and also Christianity.
Yes.
That's the short story.
Yes, that's the short story. Yeah. So the framing for tonight's conversation that MIKAEL and I sort of developed together was this feeling that it's easy to feel disheartened when it comes to our own species, that it's easy to look around and see the greed, cruelty, war, oppression, destruction of nature, pollution, etc. And it seems like, compared to most other species, we're the ones who make a mess of things. And even when we try to do something good, we often end up making things worse, it seems like. And so based on that, the question is, well, could it be that it's not our being human, our humanness, that is the problem here, but that we haven't yet learned how to be fully human, how to be truly human, and that there is the potential for that? Could it be that humanity is a promise waiting to be fulfilled? In one way, one thing that we're asking is this question of what is it to be a human being? What kind of animal is the human animal? And I was going to ask you, MIKAEL, about your reflections, but actually I'm going to start instead myself, if that's okay with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I have here with me a piece of paper here, which I found yesterday in the attic, which is my handwritten notes from the first time I met you, the first time I heard you lecture.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm flattered that you kept it.
Yes, I found it in the course of minutes, so I was very impressed by my own organizational skills, because that usually doesn't happen. And so this is coming up on 15 years ago. I had just moved to Uppsala, and I had just started a wonderful course called The Philosophy of Life at CIMUS, which is the Center for Environment and Development Studies, and they're co-hosting this event. I forgot to say, sorry, CIMUS. I think it was the very first lecture of the course was given by you, and I think the topic was modernity and the search for meaning. Mm-hmm. And based on that, and also this essay that I found that I wrote based on reading your book then and the lectures, I can say that I think that we've both been thinking about the same things since then for the past 15 years. We've just been having the same questions in our minds. So before I came to Uppsala and took this course with you, I had been studying economics for a couple of years. And within mainstream economics, the view of what it means to be human is this homo economicus, so that we are a rational agent going around making calculated decisions to maximize utility and profit, and etc. And I was very troubled by this homo economicus, and so it was very good to come to a context where people were discussing that, at least. And our professors always said, "Oh, it's a simplification. It's a simplification. We know it's not really like that, but." This simplification about us being mostly a producer or a consumer making sort of self-interested choices is really one of the basic ideas that underlies our society, I think, because we make it such a big part of our society. And the other thing that troubled me was this thing about humans being a sort of passive receptacle for the selfish genes to procreate. So we think that we're going around doing all these meaningful things, but really it's this, we're sort of a slave to our genes and just want to procreate, which I've written about here in this text. It's very funny reading something you wrote when you were 22. But I can see here that I write that it could be that a human is no more than an intelligently composed, coherent mass of cells, blood, and bone. And the terrifying thing is I cannot know that the emotions I experience are not a part of a biological reward mechanism in my brain, making sure that I eat, sleep, stay social, and procreate. So this troubled me. But I also write that I don't think this is the case, because all the things that have flowed from human consciousness, be it music or poetry, literature or politics, profound acts of love or bravery, were not created as a byproduct of a reward mechanism designed to further the human race. So these were the 22-year-old Ingrid speaking here. And I think that in both cases, this homo economicus and also this evolutionary perspective on what it means to be human, they're not exactly wrong, but they're so partial as compared to the full, compared to how I think it feels for most of us to experience life, to experience living. And I think that since the past 15 years, I've perhaps become more confident in that my experience of life as being richer, that the possibilities of the human experience are so much wider than what can be encompassed in those two ways of viewing the human. Well, this has certainly been an important thread of inquiry for me. We get so boxed in by these myths or these stories that it hinders us to a great deal in exploring what is possible. So I was so excited by these documents from the past, so I wanted to share this. But how does this relate to your journey with this question of what it means to be a human being?
Well, I think that question was what actually made me study anthropology in the first place. And from my perspective, I made an early distinction when I was young between human beings and humanity. I was thinking of human beings as men and women of flesh and blood, people like you and me. But then humanity was the idea of us, the idea about what it is to be a human being. And in different cultures, you have different ideas what it means to be, what humanity is. And in the Zygmunt Bauman in one passage says that humanity has so far only existed in potentia, as a yet to be realized possibility. So from that perspective, then humanity is really a promise that is waiting to be fulfilled, something that is yet to be realized. And but I think that as an anthropologist, I view people slightly differently from how I do it as a sort of a kind of a religious person. Because as an anthropologist, I would say that human beings are empty. Genetically speaking, we have a very weak genetic program, which means that we have no idea what to do, how to build our houses, who is to be allowed to have power in society, to mate with whom, who are we to count as our relatives. Nothing of this is given in our genetic program, whereas other animals know exactly what to do. So they build their houses in the same way. The magpie, skatan, builds exactly the same nests in the Rocky Mountains as they do in Finland, because this is what they do. They are the embodiment of their own culture. Whereas human beings are in that sense empty. There is this void in us that needs to be filled with something else than a genetic program. And we fill it with a cultural program instead, which to us, when we live in a culture, the culture seems to us natural. It becomes naturalized. So this is why we see that other people have culture, but we don't. Because it's always something that we see in others rather than ourselves. But another way to talk about the emptiness of being a human being is to talk about it in terms of freedom, because that is exactly what it means. A magpie or a beaver or a fox are not free to build any kinds of dwellings or dens. They are not free to organize their lives in any possible way. They are bound by their genetic program, but we are not. So this is why our emptiness also is the source of our freedom. So I think that and we have then the freedom to create ideas about what it is to be a human being. And we have different ideas of humanity, and you just talked about here, I think, Adam Smith's notion, for instance, that we are basically self-interested beings that try to maximize our own good in our actions. That is one way of viewing human beings. Another is to see us as containers of selfish genes, or maybe as driven by our repressed desires and traumas. That would be Freud, for instance.
That's right.
So we have all these kinds of different ideas about humanity. But then there's also the possibility that there is an idea about humanity that is not formed by culture. That is God's idea of humanity. And then we leave. I have to leave my anthropological textbooks and go into another mode of thinking, another language, in a sense. But I think that is also an idea that even if we don't believe in it, we can nurture that idea that there's something, we're destined for something that transcends any cultural or historic or social boundaries. There's something eternal in us that is connected not only with other human beings, but with the source of life itself.
And so in that language and that mode of thought, how would you begin to answer that question of what it is to be a human?
Well, I think, again, I don't think that there's any empirically correct answer to that question, but it is a question of will. How do we use our freedom to think about ourselves. And what kind of society do we create? So I think that we have to have an image, an idea of what it is to be a human being, and then we create a society to surround that human being. Just like a tailor needs an idea of the body. When a tailor is making a dress, he or she needs an idea of what body fits into this dress. So you have to have an idea of the body before you make the dress. And I think that we have to need to have an idea of humanity before we construct a society. And now we have had the basic and dominant idea in our society has been the idea that we are self-centered, homo economicus. That is the winning idea, the winning concept in our part of the world.
And then we've created
we have created a neoliberal society today, which basically has turned society into a marketplace, and all of us into producers or consumers. And this is a possible way of construing human life, but it is very, very reductionist, I would say. Yeah.
Well, you said that all of the other species, they have their role, they sort of know what to do. They have an idea of what to do. Well, we don't. And if we have this, it seems reasonable that in this web of living things, we all play our part. But then, what is the part that we play in that case in this living web?
Exactly, and I think that for this reason we have to leave, in a sense, the natural sciences, because I think that the other animals, basically, I mean, there is a wide difference between them, of course, but they all have some sort of meaningful function in the ecosystem, at least in the ecosystem where they were born, whereas human beings are more or less badly adapted wherever we turn up. So I don't think that our role is, in that sense, ecological. If it's not ecological, it has to be something else. And I think perhaps that Roy Rappaport, who was an anthropologist, says someplace that humanity is not only a species among others, it is the only way in which the world can think about itself. And somewhere there, I think there's the clue to our existence, that it is through our self-reflection, through our experience of the world's beauty and meaning, something of the world becomes realized only through us. I don't think that a magpie or a fox or a wolf conceives the world as beautiful. It just acts in it. Of course, this is very hard to say for us, but I don't think that beauty is a quality that they ascribe to the world, but we do. So in that sense, you could say that perhaps our role is to be the ears and eyes of God.
You wrote somewhere in your book about this. I think that you were quoting Etty Hillesum. And Etty, how do we quickly summarize her? She was living in the Netherlands under German occupation.
Yeah, she was a very, very free thinker, Jewish woman. And her diaries were saved. She was murdered by the Nazis in 1943, I think. And a very influential thinker, and would have, of course, been a much more influential thinker if she had been allowed to live.
Yes.
So, and she also retained a love for life throughout the horrors of Auschwitz and the camps where she spent the last months of her life. And her idea was that life is beautiful. Life is meaningful, inherently and inherently beautiful. And that her role in Auschwitz was basically to remind people that life is truly meaningful and beautiful.
Yes, and I think it was another talk that you did. You talked about how she said that it's the moral duty of humanity to help God and to take responsibility for God. All of us are called upon to prepare a place in ourselves where God can dwell, so that the spirit of love will survive in and through the horrors created by man. So based on what you said about being the eyes and ears of God, and what she is saying, what could it be that it's a different way of thinking compared to what a lot of people think? We're the ones who ask God for help, but could it be that we're helping God?
Yes. Yes, I think this is an idea of this is a way of thinking about God that I find extremely meaningful to myself.
Yeah.
And this is why also I think that the story, the Christmas story, of the birth of the child in Bethlehem, and that God comes, that God is carried by human beings, that God is threatened. Jesus is threatened and persecuted, and his parents flee the country, and they carry this small individual, and this is the image of God, the very image of God. And to me, it's a very strong image of God. And for that reason also I see that God is constantly born into this world. With every child, God appears through every child. That every child in that sense is a prism that opens up the light of God into this world. This is not poetry. This is how I feel about it.
Yes.
And I think it's an important thought for me. Of course, then again, how do we go from that understanding of the human being as godlike to understanding the horrors of the world today? Yeah, and what we have become.
Well, do you have? Go ahead. No. Well, I think that exactly that it is a question, but it does seem like the one thing that seems to set us apart from other animals is that we do have this choice, like you said. We make this moral choice in which we are either opening ourselves up to what is godlike. So, what is the expression of beauty, life, goodness in the world? But we can choose something else. But maybe also this choosing beauty and life and goodness is extra powerful because we can choose something else.
Exactly.
Because if there wasn't this choice, and then if we hadn't eaten this apple of knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil, then it would be a different kind of drama. There would be no drama, you could say. There would be no story, in a way, of our life here on Earth. But because we have this choice, there is något står på spel. Something is at stake in that.
Yes, and I would say that for that reason also humans are the only moral creature and also the only immoral creature. And I write in my latest book about the goodness of the child, because I believe that children are truly good, but they are not morally good. Because we can be morally good, you and me, if we make a good choice, if we make a moral choice, we help somebody, then we express a goodness in that sense. But we do it only because we also have the option of doing something else. We're not bound to act in this way. But if the essence of God is love, then God is not morally good, because there's no choice. For a God that is truly good and completely love, there is no choice. So in that sense, God is bound by his own goodness. And God is not morally good, but good as essentially ontologically good. And in that sense, I feel that the small child's goodness is related to God's goodness. It is God's goodness that appears to us through the child. Because the child is not good by choice, by doing the choice, but it's very essence, the existence of the child in itself. And in thinking about these issues, I also have a lot of help from, Christian theology, but also from Native American traditions. Among the Navajo people of the American Southwest, also called the Diné in their own language. In their philosophy, at least as it is described by anthropologists, the child is born as a whole person. It's complete, absolutely complete. It is yin and yang intertwined. It is androgynous. There is no separation. There's no sexuality. Everything is just connected. And for that being, the child is whole and holy. But it also remains outside of the dynamics that makes life life. Because life is based on a lack, on desire, and desire is born out of lack. So somewhere along the way, this child, this wholeness, has to be broken up. And this happens through puberty, the Navajo say. And we become half, men and women. This is a sort of a kind of heterosexual binary model of the world. But so that halfness, that separation between the male and female aspect means that a desire is born in us through the halfness of our life. Something is broken. And what is broken wants to be healed. But to be healed is no longer possible within the person itself, but you have to stretch out of yourself. And so out of this lack, this fundamental lack in being a human being, life is born. And when we become old again, we become ideally whole persons again. We become like the children were. So we have gone sort of full circle, and we'll come back to that point. And to me, this is also a way of sort of accounting for not only just a philosophical system, but something that's real, a real experience. Why is it that we become so fragmented and so broken? And what is our longing for finding this identity to become special? Well, the Navajo philosophy can sort of account for that. When we are the most special, the most individualized, we are also most fragmented. That is the peak of fragmentation. So in the Navajo philosophy, you have to close that again. But in our own philosophy, individualism is a goal in itself. It's not a means to an end.
Yeah, and I think that matches both my own experiences and how I've understood that other people, the journeys that other people have made, is that when we're born, when we're very small, we don't really feel that separation either between ourselves and other humans or ourselves and the rest of the world. There is an aspect of wholeness, but necessarily as we become part of the world, because that's having newly become a mother myself. There was certainly very much this otherworldly feeling about my daughter when she arrived, and then gradually. It became clear that she arrived properly and she became part of this world. And I think that for many of us, we've then maybe experienced as one gets older. I think for me personally, it seems like it starts before puberty, that, maybe especially starting school, you start to get away from yourself. You start to lose yourself in a way, lose that perhaps natural connection, especially to the natural world, and maybe to God. I mean, as a small child, you don't think about it maybe in those terms. And then it's only once you've, become an adult that you can start to try to make that journey back to yourself and back to God, because there is that longing, like you say, there is that desire, maybe not just for another person, but a longing for God and of homecoming. And but somehow, like the DNA say, that maybe it's necessary to make that journey, because you are then have with you also the experiences of living in the world, and so coming back to oneself, coming back to God with that experience is something else than just this natural ontological goodness of the newborn, as you said. So it's easy to say, well, what we need to do is to open ourselves to expressing that which is beautiful, that which is good, of being in support of life, of expressing life in the world, expressing being an expression of God on earth. We can say those things, and then the question is, well, what does it really mean, or how do we do it? And what does it mean to take responsibility for our life? Because I know that that's what or like what Etty said, taking responsibility for God. What does that mean, really?
Well, it means, I would say it means that we need to have much, much higher expectations on ourselves than we have. This society has turned us into consumers and tries to tell us that we are self-centered, egocentric, that politics is basically dead, that the political question, how should we create a society together, is no more a relevant question, but that the relevant question is, how can I maximize my own good? How will these political decisions affect me in my life? But that is not a political question, that is a consumer question. That is the question that I ask as a consumer. And so I would say that this society has basically killed politics as a discussion about the common good. And it has done so because it has turned us into consumers, and it has sold that self-image to us, that this is what we are about. And there are other images that we need to live with. The one is that we are the image of God. There is kind of a powerful image that is something completely different, that also raises the expectations on us. What can I expect of myself? Well, I can expect of myself to be a saint. And that is kind of a very high expectation, but I think that's a realistic expectation as well, because I don't think that the saints are fundamentally different from us. There's a continuum. Talking about the saints as sort of, the people up there somewhere, this truly spiritual people, is creating a gap between us that is not fruitful. I think that we should think of ourselves as potential saints, each and every one of us. And that image, that self-image, will affect us. I read this story the other day about an eagle that was born in a chicken farm. For some reason, it was hatched in a chicken farm. So it was laying there among the chicken eggs, and it was hatched, and it emerged from its egg, and it grew up among the chicken. And the chicken never flew, and neither did this eagle, because it thought it was a chicken. And one day it looked up into the sky, and it saw this majestic bird coming across the sky. It said, "Wow, what is that?" "That's an eagle." "Wow, that's a wonderful bird. I'd like to be one myself." Of course, his self-image was that he was a chicken, so he never became an eagle. He never flew. So he just lived his whole life as a chicken, even if he was an eagle. And well, you get my story, the point of my story. I think this is the way many of us live. We live as consumers, as something that we are not, as sort of a reduced version of ourselves.
Absolutely. And maybe I would add that, because I think that a lot of people have very high expectations of themselves, too high in terms of people being burnt out left, right, and center. And so we have to not expect exactly more of ourselves, but we have to change the expectation of ourselves. We have to expect more, maybe in the spiritual sense. It seems that people are in one way also completely exhausted by expectations, but maybe by the wrong kind.
Exactly. I think that's a very good point. Also, when it comes to responsibility, to take responsibility for the world, to be responsible is to be response-able, that is, able to respond. And responsibility is exactly the ability to respond. And I would say that responding to the world, being able to respond to the world, is based on the notion that the world has an interest in me. The world claims me. And by taking responsibility, I make myself part of the world. I make myself at home in the world. And so lack of responsibility is basically homelessness and alienation. But also there's the sense that many people have that the responsibility is too great, that responsibility is a burden rather than a privilege. And I think we should rethink that and think of responsibility basically as a privilege, as a way of affirming and reaffirming our belongingness to the world. But then, if, of course, some people feel that the responsibility is too heavy on their shoulders, but you also have to be responsible to yourself. If you're not responsible to yourself, you cannot be responsible to the rest of the world. Then you will actually be burnt out, because many people have that problem, that they take too much responsibility for the voices from the outside, but not from the voice from the inside.
Yeah, and I think that you, when I heard you speaking about this previously, you made a useful distinction between the responsibility that is about sort of assigning, not exactly assigning blame, but saying that, if we're going to reduce our carbon footprint or something, then we have to take this responsibility in this way. And that's one type of responsibility. But I think what you're talking about here is this moral responsibility, which is more actually about a way of being in the world, as far as I can understand you. But
Yeah.
it's not saying, oh, now I take all of these, this terrible destruction that I see in the world, and now I'm going to fix it, because that often leads to this, that we see ourselves as these burdened saviors and feel frustrated, because that's not really the way the world works, but rather that as an understanding of, in the sense that Etti Hillesum said, that we talked about previously, by creating a space in ourselves for harboring that which is sacred, that which is beautiful and good, we are creating a space for God in ourselves, and that this is maybe our greatest responsibility, and we can do that both in relation to ourselves, like you said, or in relation to other people, and it can be sometimes in the deceptively small. It doesn't have to be these, you don't have to start a huge project, which is how many people, including myself, tend to think of taking responsibility. Or I don't know if that's a correct understanding of...
Yeah, and what I came to think of, in the Lakota language, there is no word for identity as we would have it. But there is something pretty close that is slolichia. And slolichia means to know yourself, to know oneself. And when this was explained by a Lakota elder, he said that knowing yourself means knowing the boundaries of your being. And your being is not only the physical being, but the field that is mine. And this field that is mine, that is me basically, expands and contracts in different situations. So being socially competent in a Lakota setting means that you know exactly who the other people are in relation to yourself. So it's okay perhaps to joke with one person, but not with another. I cannot joke with my sisters, but I can joke with my nieces, for instance. I have a respect relationship to my parents, but I can joke with my grandparents. So the field of agency, in a sense, is very flexible. But knowing yourself, slolichia, means exactly to be comfortable in different situations. And taking then too much responsibility is not knowing yourself. Trying to do too much, not assessing your task in relation to your capacities. And I think that this is a very important competence that we all need to know ourselves in that sense.
Yes, know thyself, absolutely. Related to that is also how do we respond or deal with feelings of despair in relation to that, when we feel that things are really not going well, either for ourselves personally or for the world in general. I think that for a lot of us, those periods of difficulty can have the potential to help us become more human in a way. Everyone experiences these dark nights of the soul, and maybe now we're experiencing somehow a kind of collective dark night of the soul. But in your personal experience, how do you deal with that, and what you take with you, what you've taken with you from Christianity and also from your life with the Lakota? What do we do when things get difficult, when things get tough?
I'm not a coach, and I would
I
never.
was asking about your personal.
Yeah, precisely. And I think I'm pretty bad at not very good at dealing with these things.
Okay.
Personally, I carry too much frustration and anger to be a sort of a spiritual person in that sense, I must say. When Donald Trump was re-elected, since then I have not watched TV once. I cannot take the risk of seeing his face or hearing his voice. And this is not a very mature way of dealing with it, I know. But I have a true struggle to deal with this, because I feel that if my own humanity, my compassion, my love for life and for humanity is threatened, I have to protect that in myself. So I have to protect my capacity to love. And I feel that some individuals actually threaten that capacity in me. And in that sense, they threaten my basic humanity, as I understand it. So they are a threat, actually, to that space that Etty Hillesum was talking about, the space that we reserve for God. And so I think that we need very strong protections against the forces that invade that space. This is how one Lakota man also explained the use of war paint among Lakota warriors in the past. I don't know if this was his version or an official version. There is very individualistic culture as well, with many different philosophers interpreting their tradition in different ways. But he said that the war paint is not to scare the enemies, but it is to protect your own humanity. That is why you have the face paint. To protect that, because you will do terrible things. You will do terrible things on the war path and in war, and you have to protect your own humanity. So that is basically what I'm trying to do in this situation.
Well, I think, and certainly taking a break from the incessant sort of mediated media landscape that we find ourselves in is probably a very good thing for many of us to do occasionally. Yes, so certainly protection.
And one way to do that is to spend a lot of time with children, with small children, with my grandchildren, because they remind me of that possibility, of that compassion.
Yes.
Also, sort of they make me realize that the image of God is not that far away.
Yeah.
Neither in them nor in myself. That there's still the power of love that is so strong, and they serve as a reminder of that. And I think that we all need those reminders.
Yes, and it's easy to be overwhelmed by what we direct our attention towards. Because, like you said, I mean, I spend my whole day with a 9-month-old, so of course this view of life is being very reinforced in me very strongly. While if you spend all day in a mediated world, and actually it's not really the real world, because
exactly.
It's about real events, but it is actually mediated, and I think that we spend a very, very large part of our life now in something that is unreal, actually. And so maybe that is also one way to, when things get difficult, is to return to having real experiences, or focusing on what is real in your life. And it's a very easy way, or a very quick way to perhaps strengthen that glow in ourselves. So I think that the way that we spend most of our time, not in conversation with other human beings or in relation to other real beings, be they human or not, it's very normalized, and it's actually completely not normal for us to be always interacting with this artificial aspect of reality. And another thing that you wrote about in your book was how for the Native American peoples, when their culture was being decimated or under threat, it was very important for them to continue to practice their rituals, their prayers, and so on, as a way of keeping things together, keeping them from disintegrating. And of course, we're in a different situation now in modern life. But what about the role of prayer and perhaps religion. I'm not quite sure. Sorry, this isn't a completely clear question, but I know that you've said previously, I think that you don't think that a return to religion in itself is the answer that we are seeking here. Am I remembering correctly?
Not institutionalized religion, no, not in my understanding of it. I mean, even if I work for the church and I find I sense the sanctity of these buildings and the places and the songs and the rituals, but a sort of collective return to some form more of religious practice, I think it's unrealistic and undesirable. But religion comes from the words religare, to bind together, to heal in that sense. So in that sense, we all need religion. Powers that heal and bring us together. But we also need, I think, to understand religion as a language. This is how I understand it. To me, learning Christianity or learning the Lakota spirituality was basically to learn a language, a way of expressing things. And this is the way I think of it. So if somebody says, I'm not religious, it means to me that you do not use a religious language. You are uncomfortable with it or you can't speak it, which I respect. But this is how I view it. And to me, speaking in religious terms, using concepts like God, has opened up the world for me. In the same way, yes, as music is also a language, and somebody says, I don't like this. Well, you don't have to like this music, but if you would learn it, you would perhaps experience things that you would not experience otherwise, because there is something in this language that is enriching your life, perhaps. This is not a very clear answer to your question.
It was very good.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, very helpful. I remember on that first course that we took, I think you were talking about taking part in the sweat lodge, the Lakota sweat lodge, and maybe somebody asked about, well, what if you don't really feel anything when these prayers are being said, or something or other? And you said that when it comes to these kinds of spiritual practices, it's best to fake it till you make it. Yeah. In the sense that I was, which I was totally shocked by at the time. I wasn't shocked, but I was like, really faking it till you make it? No, it has to be, real from the beginning. But now I've come to, I think, appreciate that more.
Yeah, I mean, it's a brutal way of expressing it, but I mean, it basically means just do it. And going to the Inikarapi, the sweat lodge with the Lakota, it doesn't require you to have any theological ideas whatsoever. You don't have to make any confessions to any spiritual tradition. You just go in there and you will use your body as a tool for understanding creation, not your mind. And you will sense all the things that we say, mitaku yasen, we are all related, we are all belong together. It's not an intellectual insight, it's a bodily insight. It comes from the bodily experience of sharing that very hot place with other people and singing those songs. And all those words, grandfather, have pity on us, is given a meaning in that situation because the heat is so painful. And we all suffer from the same heat and the same relief when the door is open. So all of a sudden, and everything I had read about Lakota people in my literature was very, very trivial for my understanding them in relation to this experience. Because this was really a true experience of a common humanity. Yeah. So this is one way of learning a religion through your body rather than through your mind. And I think we have got this upside down in our society. We think that first we have to sort of come to an insight, a revelation of God, and then we can go to the church or do something. I think it's the other way around. Just do your thing and claim the places as yours. The dome is your place to be. It's not nobody else's. You don't have to. There are no requirements. There's nothing between you and God.
What a great way to to end this first session, I think. Thank you so much, Mikael. I think that maybe we talk to each other for a few minutes. So turn to your neighbor and just share a bit about what has stayed with you from this first session of listening to Mikael and myself. When we come back from that, we can have some questions.
Yeah, I will start saying I really appreciated your criticisms of Homo economicus and the idea that we are fully rational, selfish human beings, essentially. Because I want people to really find and appreciate being human in today's world. With all the bots and all the things that are coming, I think people will have to find and regain love for themselves as they are, just the way that they are. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I found that in many parts of your talk, you search for something supernatural to give meaning to, and maybe use the word of God or something to kind of, give some extra purpose to being human beyond just being human. And while I can see the goal of that, and while I can sympathize with it, I also wonder whether being superhuman or being something more than human can just be also becoming more aware of our humanity.
Would you like to comment that, Ingrid?
No, you go ahead.
No. I'm trying to avoid the question. No, but I can only say, yes, I agree. And but to me, the concept of supernatural, I don't believe in supernatural things, and because I have no reason to believe in them. And many would say, well, then you can't believe in God. But this is not my understanding of God. God is the most natural thing in the world. But it's not an entity. So I don't like to... I think certain concepts... let me say it like this. Many concepts that we use because they define things. They create boundaries around them. A table. Now that concept is useful exactly because it creates boundaries towards other things. So I can communicate with you. I say, have a table. And so it locks in things, defines them, creates boundaries around them. So the language is a system of differences. And this is what concepts are. But there are certain concepts that do not bound things, that do not close them, but open up things. Concepts like the soul, or God, or love, cannot ever be bound. They're concepts of a very, very different kind. And the reality of love can only be assessed in relation to your experiences. Is there love in the world? Well, it's not an empirical thing out there. Is there love in the world? That answer can only be given in relation to your own experiences. Yes or no. And in the same way, I would say certain concepts like soul or God are concepts that only can be assessed, the meaningfulness of them can only be assessed in relation to your life. And to some people, love is not a meaningful concept because they have never experienced it. To some people, God is not a meaningful concept at all, for the same reason. But a person that finds, for example, the concept of soul meaningless, I understand that, but I think also it's kind of a tragic life, not to experience the world as animated. Yeah. Well, that was a long detour.
I just want to say thank you for this extraordinary gift that this conversation was. I was wondering whether you would or could or have anything to share around prayers, thinking that we're looking for God inside ourselves and in children, like you're saying, or in each other. Do you have thoughts on prayers that you might want to share? Could be also sort of a private thing.
Well, I can share certain things. I think praying is hard. It comes natural to me, but it's difficult. There is the sort of the Janis Joplin kind of prayer. Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz? This is magic. Okay, so we think that we utter a phrase, then something will happen. And this is the most primitive form, but also I would think the most human form of praying. This is the way I pray all the time. Lord, won't you save my children? Protect them from evil. All these things. And I know that, I was once sitting in an airplane and there was turbulence. It was a horrible experience. And I was praying, Lord, please don't let the plane crash. But then there's an intellectual side. I said, why would God spare this particular plane? I mean, for what reason? Are we so special? Of course not. So I realized that I cannot ask God for these things, because that would be a God that I can't believe in. I can't believe in a God who saves certain individuals and not others. And then I realized the only thing I can pray for is my own reaction. So I said, God, make me strong enough to meet this challenge, or something like that. And it was to me a meaningful way of praying. So I think I'm trying to intellectually, I'm distancing myself from the Janis Joplin kind of praying, the magic kind of praying. But I think that it's very, very human to pray that way, especially if there's a real life crisis. We tend to do that. But otherwise, praying is a dialogue, an inner dialogue, and you could say that you're talking to yourself. But it's very hard to formulate any ideas when you're talking to yourself. I realized this when I was writing my diary and doing my field work, and my notes were so unanimated, unreadable, terrible, boring. First I did this, then I did that, then I went there. Then it was not possible to read this. And then I realized that I have to imagine somebody, a recipient. I'm talking to somebody. And by doing that, all of a sudden my language was kind of flowing. It became a readable text. And I think that this is also the purpose of God. Whether we believe in God, whatever that means or not, to create that dialogue, that inner dialogue that presupposes somebody, a recipient. Because without that notion of a recipient, you cannot create that dialogue, I think. This is why even writing a diary is like a dialogue. Dear diary. Because we have to talk to somebody. We can't just talk to ourselves, because become mute. So whether we believe in God or not, it's a very useful idea.
I think in terms of my own journey with prayer, I think in this case I certainly have learned from your maxim there of fake it till you make it, mm-hmm. in the sense that in the beginning a prayer can feel very uncomfortable or strange if it's not a practice that you are familiar with. It was that way for me. And it can help to sort of start with thinking of it not just as a dialogue, but that just the way of doing things, the way of preparing a meal for your family, or the way of, the way of creating a beautiful bouquet of flowers, just so that this can be a prayer. This was exactly. A good start for me anyway. Mm-hmm. And then in the same with something that can feel difficult, this conversation, and to really feel like this is a conversation, that someone is listening, that this is also something that grows stronger over time. Mm. Has been my experience of prayer.
I have two questions, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. I'm not religious, but I think I'm fairly spiritual. But sometimes I have trouble understanding these concepts of prayer, for example. So I'm curious, when you pray to God for strength and the prayer is fulfilled, who are you grateful to, God or yourself? Mm.
Well, from my point of view, you could say that I am grateful towards that aspect of myself that I call God. That would be one way of phrasing it. Because there is no separation between you and God. So thanking God is in that sense turning inwards towards an aspect of yourself. That would be one way of phrasing it. Yeah, but I think that thankfulness is also a tricky thing. Should I be thankful when things are going my way, and not thankful when they are not? What kind of a God is this? Has this kind of strange ideas of, I'm going to help him this time, but not next time. Oh, thank you, God, for helping me this time. I mean, so that is a tricky thing. Yeah. Your next question was?
Thank you. My next question was more about technological advancements. So now that we're getting more and more access to interactive large language models and AI that we can talk to, I was wondering if you think that poses a threat to prayer, because we now have this artificial man-made thing to have a dialogue with.
Well,
I think absolutely. Yeah. I think I don't know if it's a real threat because the experience of it is so different. But I do think that there's something very interesting about the whole AI project in the sense that it is very clearly trying to replicate and create a counterfeit, a fake copy of the real thing. And so it is always taking the things that have been expressed by humans, created by humans, and then sort of remixing. And it is in a way when it comes to this discernment that we were talking about that we all have to make in every moment in terms of understanding what is contributing to beauty, to life, etc. How are we expressing what is sacred and what is holy in our life now? I think that AI, unfortunately, is almost always taking us away from that. So it feels very oracular, like asking an oracle, right? You bring your question to the oracle, and then you get an answer. And so I think in every situation where we will be very well served by turning those questions inwards or to other humans instead. So I don't know if it's a real threat to prayer because it's such a different experience, but it is interesting how it's such a parallel and such a counterfeit, so to speak. What do you want to add something, Mikael?
No, I think your answer was good. Yeah, I was thinking of this experiment they made once with a patient psychologist situation. One group of patients or clients talked to a real psychologist, and the psychologist did nothing else but said nodding every once in a while and like that. And afterwards, the client felt this was great psychologist. This really helped me. And the other control group were sitting in front of a blanket, and so there was. And they said to them that behind this blanket there is the psychologist sitting. And this is a very, very important point that you don't see him or her. But you just open your heart. And the person did. And on the other side of the blanket there was a tape recorder that sort of randomly just said, every once in a while. And the clients felt this was great. There was no difference in their experience. I don't know how true the story is, but I think it is a true story. And you could say that the experience can be authentic even if the situation is inauthentic. It's like among Native Americans, for instance, some of the dances that they do, some of the attributes that they use in rituals, for instance, anthropologists and historians can say that, well, this is not really part of your tradition. This is made up. This is fake. This has been imported from other tribes or from popular culture or from Hollywood. So this is not really the real thing. And you could say that, okay, the tools may be inauthentic, but the experiences are authentic. So what is happening is real. The therapy is real, even if the psychologist is fake. Is that applicable to this?
Well, of course, what the answers that we get when we ask AI something have come from sort of a mishmash of things that humans have said. So of course it's not like that we can't get anything out of it. But I think that we're always confronted with these things in our life about where it requires our discernment to sort of to develop it more and more. There are continuously these things where there's an experience that feels real, with depth, beauty, and clarity. And that can maybe be when you're trying to, for example, develop a spiritual practice. You are having to constantly reflect on, when I read this spiritual text, when I listen to this preacher, when I am taking part in this ritual, what is this doing, or what is arising in me as I take part in it? Take part in this. Is this a beautiful expression of God? And then I go forward with that. This is in terms of the spiritual aspect of it. I mean, AI can be used for lots of different things. It was just in terms of the question of whether it would replace prayer. So I think that it's up to us to continuously try to discern between the real and the counterfeit, the living and its copy.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, I would say that prayer takes place in the innermost room in our lives. That is where prayer is happening. And whatever unlocks that room is a sort of a tool, a spiritual tool.
Can I add a comment? Because you just made me think something.
Yeah, please.
Whenever I talk to AI, I work with AI as well. But whenever it's very easy to feel like you're talking to something else or something authoritative, and it's very good at sounding confident. And then you get into these loops where you feel like you're having a discussion with another person. And then eventually you realize you're going in circles, and it clicks that you're actually just talking to yourself because it's so easily led by your own subtle word choices and what you want to get out of it. And what you were just saying about how kind of having a dialogue with yourself, at some points when talking with an LLM, you kind of realize you've been talking to yourself all along. And maybe just like remembering that you're talking to yourself would make it easier to use it as a more useful tool in that way.
Yeah.
Thank you for that reflection.
Thank you very much for very inspiring talk. I have a question. You seem to think, which I also do, that we are essentially moral beings, that to find the answers to what is good and how to take responsibility for ourselves and for others, the answer is within us, in a sense. But it's also difficult, I think, to find, I mean, how shall I act? Because I don't have the knowledge of what is the best good for everyone and for myself in my actions. I think this is very difficult. My whole life I struggled for what am I doing here, and what shall I do in this world? Because our society is based on what you said before, Homo economicus. But when you talk, you seem to think that introspection is a tool to get to the answer or something. I don't know. That's my question.
Yeah, introspection, perhaps, yes. But it also what is on the inside. And the Lakota notion of the person is that the person, a human being like myself, is actually an assemblage of powers. So medicine men, holy people, have many different powers in them. And the first power that is implanted in young boys is the power of the lizard. And in young girls, the power of the turtle. And then you have visions from different animals and different forms of creation. So in a sense, What's on the inside is also what's on the outside. The powers that are on the outside are also on my inside. So introspection is not looking only at myself. It is looking at the world as it has come together in me. So this is how the medicine men heal. They use the forces, or rather the forces use them as a tool. The thunder heals through me, or the wolf or the bear use their powers through me. So in that sense, introspection is kind of a tricky concept here. What are we looking at? It's not sort of an egocentric view of looking at oneself. The answer is in you. Yes, in a sense, but what is in you is also out there. Something like that.
I think that's a wonderful note to maybe end on. So, Mikael, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
For coming, and thank you to all of you for your wonderful reflections and questions this evening. I hope to see you again.
Thank you.
This conversation was part of a series of events on the concept of life force. You'll find the previous 2 episodes at forestofthought.com. This episode was produced in collaboration with CIMUS at Uppsala University, with support from the Veriditas Foundation. Forest of Thought will be taking a little break, but we'll be back with more episodes before you know it. Make sure to follow the show on your listening platform or on social media to receive updates, and go to patreon.com/forestofthought to support the podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.